Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about composition, but I'm not going to be talking about it from the same perspective you get to hear about it, like, you know, leading lines and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I just want to talk about how I like to use composition beyond those things. One of them is geometry. So today's topic is really going to be about geometry and how I'm inspired by geometry. So whenever I see shapes, I am I gravitate towards them, and I'm kind of forced to find a way to incorporate those shapes into my images. Um, and sometimes I actually make the shapes. So, take this image for instance. The subjects were backlit by the window, hence the slight silhouettes that they create and the blown out background. Um, so, this window was originally like a semicircle, so it's half a circle. And if you look closely, you can see the actual lines at the bottom where the line, where it stops. So it's a semicircle, half a circle. And because I'm so into shapes, I found a way to play with that semicircle. And what I did was I was able to create a reflection underneath my lens to reflect the top of the window towards the bottom. So you take a reflective surface, iPhone, mirror, what have you, put it underneath your lens and reflect the top of the window on the bottom to create a full circle. Because I like to create shapes, and I think they make for interesting backgrounds when you have subjects strategically placed in the scene with them. So that's how this image was created. Taking into consideration figure the ground, making sure my subjects were placed in a nice area in the frame where they did not compete with the background. As you can see, they're placed in the white portions of the window. Also making sure there are no distractions in the image overall. As you can see, it's a pretty minimalist image per our first video. It's a minimalist image. And I'm also playing with shapes. So I introduced the shapes into the image while focusing on all those other things that I think make a good image. So that's this image number one, circles. So I'm going to go to the second image. So this is image number two, triangles. A lot of times we're able to find triangular shapes created by light. That's generally when I find triangles, is when light hits the corner of a building or something and creates this little triangle pattern, or just at least creates a diagonal line, and you will form the triangle with your composition. So part of this is like my street photography kind of inspires a lot of the way I make images, portraits, and this play with light is something that I use a lot in street photography, and I also use it now in my weddings. So I'm able to create triangular shapes using light and shadow, and just make sure I strategically place my subjects again in a nice place, in a place where they're not competing with the background, like so. And making sure they're posed nicely, making sure there's good light on them, and making that image. Um, Again, I get to shoot in a lot of really, really mundane places, being that I live in the DMV. And this shoot was done in Baltimore. I think it was like at a construction site or something, because I tend to just walk the street and find places with interesting uh, scenes for me to shoot. And I tend to use light a lot and shadow and shapes because I don't have the really pretty backdrops like some people do in certain places, parts of the world, certain parts of the country. So I look for these other elements to play with to make my images a little bit more interesting than they would be if I was just having them stand in front of a construction trailer and taking a picture. So playing with geometry, playing with light and shadow, allow me to create images that are a little bit more interesting and artsy than I would be if I wasn't doing those things. So here's an example of a triangular image or an image playing with triangles. Now on to the next one. So here is the same couple that I showed you the triangular image with, and now they have one with squares. Um, so again, similar theme. You see good subject to ground. They are in a place in the frame where they're not competing with the background, so you're able to identify the subjects of the image pretty easily. Um, you get to see the squares that are showing up in the corners, and you see a reflection reflecting the top portion of the image on the bottom, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Um, this is a boarded up building in Baltimore City. The black are black boards that were placed in the windows and painted black. So when that is your backdrop, you have to find creative ways to make it look interesting. And, you know, playing with shape, creating reflections, creating images that don't look like they were straight out of camera when they were, are just little ways to spice up an image that would have been pretty boring had I not done that. But yeah, geometry, using shapes, squares. Now on to the next one. Here's another one using an oval. Now, the oval was the actual light source. It was a hotel. It was an interesting. It was a interesting thing in the wall. It was like a little structure in the wall, and there was light in there, and it was just enough light to be able to use to create a silhouette. And I love to create silhouettes because I'm able to create minimalist images and black out a lot of the distractions, and also just create something that looks different. So I just had the bride. This was during the bridal portraits. The groom wasn't here. I was shooting bride prep, so I had her stand in front of the light source and just play with the shape. And I was able to create this image that I think it's a little bit interesting, and not your typical image that you see every day. So yeah, my advice is to always look for shapes and see how you can incorporate your couples or your bride or your the subjects into those shapes, and try to do something interesting. So geometry is a big part of my work. I and sometimes it's not just blatant like, oh, here's a square, here's a triangle, but I play with these shapes. I play with angles and things like that to make more interesting images. So my advice is to definitely be very aware of what's around you, um, and try to incorporate as much as you can creatively without causing too much distraction in your image. And that way you'll be able to create some, compelling stuff. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm going to come out with a little bit more on composition, but I just wanted to talk about geometry pretty quick and show a few examples of how I use them, and give a little bit of inspiration about how you could use them too. I'll be more interested in seeing how you take it to the next level versus trying to duplicate some of these images. I'm sure there are other ways you could play with geometry and light and shadow and stuff like that and create some interesting compositions. So I look forward to seeing some of that stuff and seeing what you guys create. All right, thank you. Hope this was fun. If you guys have any questions or anything you want me to talk about in particular, please comment on the video so I know. It makes it a lot easier when I know I'm talking about what you really want to hear about, and not trying to figure out what's people want to hear about. So if you guys have any suggestions on what you want to hear about in particular, let me know. Even as it applies to composition, just let me know and I'll see what I can do to make that come to fruition. All right, so take care, guys. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next video. All right, bye.